got everybody logged in who's attending, so she is going to do roll call based on the list. Please go ahead.
Please acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Director Jackman.
I am here, thanks.
Director Tierney.
Present.
Director Vandenberg.
Hello.
Director Watson. Present. Alternate Director Smith.
Present.
Director Newell.
Present.
Director Cunningham.
Present, thank you.
Director Popoff.
Present, thank you.
Director Davidoff.
Didn't see him yet. We can loop back maybe.
He's not there yet.
No.
Director Hangrau. I'm here. Director Weatherhead.
Present, thank you.
Director McFadden. Present. Director DeBoon.
I didn't. Oh, he's there.
Not sure.
He's there.
He's there.
I'm present. I'm present.
There you are. Director Hewitt. Director Hewitt is online. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
do a
sorry,
sound check.
I am here. Yes.
Thank you. Director Zelznick.
Present, thank you.
Director Page.
Present.
Alternative Director Fight.
Present.
Director Lockwood. Present. Director Main. Present. Director Bueller.
That's Bueller, present.
Buller? Buller, excuse me. Okay, thank you. And then staff, CAO 4.
No.
No.
No. No.
General Manager Mala,
Present.
General Manager Wolf,
Present.
Manager Wilson, present. Akani Norimatsu, she's with EOC. Right. Nathan Shulman. Todd is not here yet. Oh,
Yes, I am. He's at the end.
Here, thank you. And myself, did I miss anybody? Janine Bradley, project manager, is also going to be. Cool. Should I saw her?
Yeah, I'm present.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Nancy. And when we do roll call, at least it serves as a good audio check. So we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. I'd like to move to agenda item 2.2, adoption of the agenda. We have a staff request for a late item, the ICI recycling contract. It's time sensitive. So Wilson. So I'm looking for a 2/3 vote to add this item as item 6. Moved and seconded. All in favor of late item being added, so we definitely have 2/3. Thank you. That will go on. Chair Watson's going to put, when we get there, the details of that item when we get to it on the agenda. In 2.3, minutes have been received, went to board. I haven't heard any concerns about that, so we will move unless there are any concerns.
You gotta move adoption of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As amended.
As well as yes, moving. Thank you very much. So looking for adoption of the agenda as amended with the addition item. Move seconded. All in favor. Thanks. 2-step. So 3, Town of Creston Septic Receiving Facility Service. Todd is here to speak to this. It was like a blast from the past. It's been so many years in the making. So a lot of board members may not have heard much about this over the last decade or dozen or 15 years. Can you give us a kind of a brief summary of where we're at? Your report is received and you don't need to take action to understand, but brief overview, make sure everyone understands it, and we'll be ready to move on in the future.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a lot of information in this report, and a lot of it is, well, it is entirely East-centric. The timing didn't work out to do this in an East Resource Recovery Committee, but we were under the understanding there would be sufficient representation to legitimize using this at a joint meeting. So yes, I will try and keep the details light, and we've got a fairly light agenda, so we do have time to discuss and get answers to the questions. And I understand a lot of some of the directors here were not, this may be the first time hearing about this. So there's quite a bit there. So really the purpose of this report is to give a brief background on the history, because this has been a long time making, since 2010. And to present some of the service options that we are favoring, and collect your feedback on this, and and if it's deemed that it's supported, then we will get to the next stage of negotiating with the town of Creston. So the septic service that we're talking about includes plans for capital infrastructure upgrades at the wastewater treatment plant and in the village, at the town of Creston. And this will be an expansion to include newly constructed septic receiving facility. And when I say, I should probably preface, I'm sure you all know what septic is, but in this context, we are meaning residential pumped materials from a residential septic system, which is then hauled and brought to drying beds in the RDCK. There's 4 sites that we have drying beds, one of them being the town of Creston. And these drying beds function to evaporate the liquids through the environment, sometimes through leaking, I suspect, because then these liners are pretty old, and then the mixing of chips, and then the dried material, when it's sufficiently cured, then goes for stockpiling and for landfill cover. So that's what I'm talking about with septage. And when I talk about a septage receiving facility, this is a more modern approach to septage management. So it is basically a connection to an existing wastewater treatment plant. And so the hauling truck pulls up with their load, they connect the hose right to the facility, and it goes into an equilibrium tank. So there's controls in place to prevent shocking of the wastewater treatment plant system by high strength waste all at once. So basically just doles it out in small doses that's manageable. So there's a lot of controls in place being treated by an actual wastewater treatment facility. And it's the same that the ministry expects and what they will support. They do not support the use of drying beds any longer. So we're looking for service models. This is really the next thing that we want to accomplish, is agreeing upon between the RDCK and the town of Creston the best service model for who does what and how. As I said, these negotiations are going on since 2010. And I'm just covered a couple of these things already. So, it's also important to note just a little bit of background as well. And we don't have a lot of controls to ensure that septic is actually what is being brought to our drying beds, and this includes a facility in Creston as well. But we know anecdotally that there's no other services to take things like grease trap waste, oil water separator waste, porta potty waste. And so we're assuming that this is all getting into these drying beds. So this is just another driver for upgrading our facilities. And Preston we see as the first phase of this. We've got a separate strategy that's existing to upgrade other facilities in the years that come. And that's one of the nice things about our receiving facilities, that you do have that oversight. You have trained wastewater treatment plant staff that will be more easily able to identify when it's not septic that's going on. And so this is the reasons why we really are pursuing municipal partnerships in our septic strategy as the top choice rather than doing it ourselves. In 2014, we developed a memorandum of understanding with the town to address the process and terms for closing the beds and creating the receiving facilities. In 2018, the town hired a consultant company to develop, to create a design and a technical brief that was Associated Engineers, and that's included in the report as attachment A. Capital costs in 2018 were $1,070,000, and that includes civil site works, structural and architectural process, mechanical, building mechanical, electrical. And at present, there's $1.38 million allocated in the 2024 financial plan for service S1A 86 for construction and engineering. full life cycle costs estimated in this brief in 2018 dollars totaled $3,184,600 for all capital replacement, operating and maintenance costs. So at this stage, RDCK is still negotiating the service model with the town. We're working with the 2019 draft agreement that they provided us to finalize issues of ownership, funding, design, construction, and operation. The feeling with RDCK staff is much of the proposed agreement will likely remain, such as RDCK providing the regional service, Creston undertaking engineering, detailed design, tendering, and construction, which some of this work has already been done. RDCK covering capital costs, and Creston operating, collecting funds, and maintaining the system. So the 2021 estimate for wastewater treatment plan, receiving facility upgrades, cost for design work, project management, construction, and then post-construction services is $131,000. And RDCK has $125,000 budgeted, but the town is combining this design work with other treatment plant upgrades, so there'll be some cost savings there. So we're hoping that it'll be below what's budgeted. Our resource recovery plan, which was submitted in 2021, has commitments for improving the septic management system in the RDCK, and it details what we knew about the Creston agreement at that time, with the leanings towards the Creston agreement. And one of the benefits with using the resource recovery plan is it allows us to access long-term borrowing without a separate public approval process, because we did extensive public consultation and that information was included in it. We did hear back from the minister that they wanted a liquid waste management plan for any septic facilities being built. We're not really in the game of doing liquid waste management plans. We don't run treatment facilities. With the town of Creston, we're in luck because we're already operating under a permit. And so we have it in writing from the ministry's support for proceeding with them. However, it's good to note with the septic strategy, if we were to build septic facilities at any of our existing facilities, we would have to go through a liquid waste management plan. It's very costly, it's very time intensive. So municipal partner allows us to a much easier process with that. So now we need to determine the best services and funding approach to expedite this project and prioritizing in the corporate finance work plan. There's several possible approaches for the operation of a new septic facility, which all require careful consideration of related legislative, regulatory, contractual, risk management, and financial factors. I'm just going to go. So in the financial consideration, I laid out the operating costs and revenues that's in the report. Currently, I've already said that's what we've got budgeted. And then in this report, we've also summarized a number of service options, which are still open for discussion. But it appears that option 5, to borrow under the RDCK's resource recovery plan authorization with all matters related to cost, revenue, and risk management addressed to the agreement between the town and the RDCK is the simplest arrangement, as it doesn't require service establishment bylaw changes or new policy. It would depend upon the ability to identify the obligations of both RDCK and the town for a contract that satisfies both parties. And the town indicates a willingness to explore the contract-only option further. So if this option is supported, the next steps are to engage the ministry for input and legal review before providing the recommended changes to the original draft for final implementation. At this time, staff have not sought input from Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing staff on any options, but we will do so once the general preferences are established by the committee. Sure.
Thanks, Todd. And that's a lot of history to condense into 5 minutes, 6-7 minutes. I have 2 speakers so far, and this is an example, I think, where municipal partnerships are very important to us. I don't know what's going to happen with Castlegar and other areas in the future, but this is something that we need to start looking at the costs and cost sensitivity and how we're going to fund this. So other than just East Resource being aware of this, I think everybody has to be aware that this is coming for all of us. We have Director Newell and Vandenberg. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I have, you touched on one of my questions, but I'll ask my first one first. So in regard to a current wastewater treatment plant that's in Creston, how much impact would this new service put on their existing plant? How much does it add? 2%? 1%?
I can speak generally, and Julie probably may have a more detailed answer, but there is an impact. This is a high-strength waste. But currently, the drying beds, there's one distinction with the drying beds in Creston from our regular drying beds, is the liquid portion does drain to their plant. So they are dealing with some of those loadings right now. And they also have loadings from the brewery. But because of that, the brewery has spent money on beefing up their system. I don't know what percentage this would add, but they have in their draft agreement, they did talk about loading considerations and payment through that. So I think, once we agree to the general terms, the formula will probably be looked at again.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wondered, in general, as we're looking in the west central area and some facility, how much that load that would add to any facility or what kind of upgrade would be required, which then leads me to maybe another staff person. Does this help us in our path? This plan, if it moves forward, help us in our pathway for dealing with this in the west and central areas?
Yes, it certainly does, through the chair. It is really the model that we hope to pursue in the future. I think if properly done, can be a win-win between municipality and the rural areas. And quite frankly, in so many ways, we are really closely linked anyhow. There is not only services to rural areas provided, but i.e. you have a municipality that pumps out the sewer system because over buildup of fats and greases in the wastewater system. This is a possibility to control and inject it back into the plant. There is things, Arrow Creek, for example, we have membranes. They are delivered in a glycol solution, and that is high in BOD, or biological oxygen demand, that can be safely injected through these means into a treatment plant. You may have a car wash sump or similar things. So there's many services that in the first moment you don't even think about it. Most recently, we had the wildfire camp in Winlaw serviced with 3 trucks daily from that camp and had to manage that waste. Right? So there's many benefits, and like I said, this is not strictly a rural service either, and I think there's many benefits to both sides if properly done. Difficulty that we have to some degree is that it needs to be either already backed by the permit that a municipality has, or as in the situation with Castlegar that are going through a liquid waste management plan exercise, you have that waiting period of 3 years likely until it's complete in order before we can make actual arrangements to incorporate that. So we have a little bit the problem that we may have to have an interim solution for some of these materials, i.e. in central, in regards to the waste accepted there and ultimately draining from there through a natural stream after a summer treatment through natural wetland system. We are just doing more sampling, see if we have sufficient treatment capacity through this or if additional capacity is required. But like I said, there's a few things that are happening parallel that we're investigating, and we may have to look for interim solutions until their municipal joint partnerships come to fruition, if at all.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so I have Directors Vandenberg, Popov, and Lockwood Go ahead, please, Director Vandenberg.
Thank you, through the chair. So am I understanding that this is going to be a project, a facility that is built independently of what's current, therefore it's a rural application, but it will tie into the town the current application? I'm a little bit confused as to what we're decommissioning and replacing, and who is directly going to be contributing to this new system. Go ahead, Lee.
Or Amy, there's a few ways to how we contribute. Who wants to go? Lee?
Just a short answer, please.
The quick answer through the chair is that the septic receiving station is in addition to their wastewater treatment plant. And currently our pits are beside the wastewater treatment plants, and those would be decommissioned once the material can go into the septic receiving station.
And so to add to this, it would be under the permit of the town's current existing permit. There may be an expansion to the permit required. They're just checking the details on that, but it would be under the permit that is existing for the wastewater treatment facility of the town of Creston.
Great, thank you. Supplemental, and we have a couple of supplementals. And yes, I understand that point. So it's merging together. Okay, thank you. So we're building a system that has sampling, screening, mixing, bioreactors, filtration. Okay, because that's the new, what you need. You can't just evaporate it anymore. Traditional lagoon style cell systems. Then if it's all together, based on the data that Associated Engineering did a number of years ago, which that information is a number of years old now, our contribution is about 13%. But we're going to pay, RDCK is going to pay, or perhaps the service is going to pay all of it, all the capital. The town will receive the user fees to pay the operations and the expenses. Am I getting that correct?
Not quite through the chair. So the 13%, I believe you refer to the operational contribution to the operational
Yes.
cost of their facility. What we are building is not treatment capacity. It is only receiving and pre-treatment. So there's a little bit of a solids removal and a monitoring screening element to it, a holding tank, potentially a small holding tank, and then it is dosed into an existing treatment component. In this case, it's called PBR. So it's a specially high strength treatment element that was specifically built for the brewery waste at the time, that's suitable to treat these components appropriately. So we do not contribute to the capital of that facility, but we pay an operational component, and with that, likely the town, if they are smart, and I would assume so, they are building into the operational piece a asset replacement component in, and we would contribute in that form to the assets that the town has.
Thank you. One more second.
Yeah, I was going to say, this buffering facility is not otherwise needed by the town of Creston. There's only 6 septic systems in the entire town of Creston, something like that. They would not need this if not for rural. But please go ahead.
Yes, there's a lot here. But I'm
Absolutely.
asking 3 little questions. The other thing that I noticed reading through the engineering report, because I got a little bit of a background in this, is the design is incomplete because the chemical components analysis, the BOD, the TSS, and actually total petroleum hydrocarbons is not even listed as one of the things, but toluene is being pointed out as being a disruptor. But at any rate, the chemical analysis back on the design back in 2013, 2015, whenever that was done, is inconclusive. So you're designing a system, but you don't have the nasties figured out that go along with it. So to me, it's a little bit incomplete. How can you design something if you haven't monitored or you're satisfied that your BOD is going to stay around 5,000, that your TSS is going to be 18,000? You know, like without that data, how can you design a system? This is a receiving component, but you're going to monitor and sample and those sorts of things. I guess I'm a little bit confused that you're missing a pretty big component to the design part. Where am I wrong here?
Okay, to start with, through the chair, the main component of interest to the municipality is the BOD, COD, so biological and chemical oxygen demand as the main loading on the facility. That is, as you pointed out, based on limited data, we did a few truckloads that we sampled at the time to try to have a somewhat of an average. It will hugely vary from load to load. Septic waste, from holding tank waste, from sumps to you name it. So the strength will always vary, and I would anticipate as we use the facility that we take regular samples and calibrate the model. In regards to treatment capacity, the capacity has to have a safety threshold anyhow. The town would not agree if we would take the last 5% of their excess capacity with that treatment facility. No municipality would put themselves in a corner like that. So there's always a treatment capacity there that as well acts as a buffer for periods of higher volume versus lower volume. There's probably some capacity built in regards to brewery expanding or reducing their impact on the treatment plant. So there's definitely buffer here. The data will be refined as we go and have more ongoing sampling. The components of higher toxicity that you are mentioning are always a concern, but they are not limited to septic waste. You can have that in the municipal system too. You have the guys that pour down toluene, for example, down the drain, and larger municipalities have specific programs. Todd has worked in one of these sites of a larger municipality, have programs where through sampling they try to find offenders. Small municipality a little bit more difficult, but this is not just a problem for rural waste, that is as well a municipal one. Hydrocarbons being specifically one, and then you have clearly emerging contaminants in the future.
Thank you, good now.
Okay, good. And you do appropriately note the age of the older reports. In fact, at one point, they stated that there's 15,000 residents floating the system with septage, and that's, there's less than 10,000. That's way over.
So I think, but I only have so many questions I can ask.
And we come for the second time, but I think town has been so aware and what's going on, and the contractors who collect are also now very heightened in their awareness of what they should be pumping out. Because if we catch them with a load to be rejected, we'll be rejected.
And if I may add, the controls are a lot stricter than they are now, where anything goes in the lagoon without supervision or control of what is being unloaded.
Yeah. So we do have Directors Popoff, Lockwood. Director Popoff, please go ahead. Somewhere up there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Just to expand a little bit on what Director Newell touched on, and I believe that are we using this sort of as a template for rural septic disposal in Otashania landfill in conjunction with the city of Castlegar?
I mean, the data will have to be gathered specific to each area, different volumes, potentially different types of materials. So they will always be specific to each municipality. We will always have to make assumptions. Where is the waste coming from? I.e., if we would have a discussion with the village of Nakas in regards to from where and how much would be coming to that facility versus what's going in the route to Otashania. We have some data about volumes. The strength obviously would again have to be recalibrated, the strength of the wastewaters, but we have the volumes closely tracked. We know that, and that would form the basis for any kind of municipal cooperation.
So a supplemental, may.
Can we let Manager Wilson just add to that, and then we'll go back to Director Popoff. Go ahead, Amy.
Through the chair, in regards to the other municipalities, we have been in discussions with Nakas and Castlegar quite a bit. And I think both Todd and or Uli are in parts of the solid waste management plan advisory groups for Nelson and Castlegar, I believe. So we are trying to keep this option open if it works for the municipalities to use this as a template, like the agreement or each facility, like Billy said, would have to be designed differently, but the actual practice of partnering and setting up an agreement, I think, like you said earlier, this would be our ideal rather than trying to set up a whole new waste management or wastewater treatment plant and the waste management plan. So.
And at a very high level with the village of Samu as well. So with the discussion. So we try to be all encompassing or whoever is interested to be partnering potentially. We'll do high level investigations as the municipality sees fit. And ideally, as we have done in Preston and potentially in the Cusp, if that is a possibility, incorporating in any kind of upgrades that a facility may need anyhow, and then incorporate that into the design that's going to be needed anyhow.
And back to Director Popoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I've got my answers here, but I just want to confirm that, rural waste as far as Argenta and that area and Edgewood are not necessarily going to be all coming to Otishania and Castlegar. That you're looking at a possibility of something in the Cusp and possibly Caswell and the other municipalities. Am I correct on that?
This, if I may, through the chair, is very much dependent where the contractor is coming from. And we do know that some of the local contractors from Castlegar service as far as Edgewood, but it depends. If they obviously hire a hauler from the Vernon area, then that will be going likely on the route back in that direction. But generally speaking, we have the volumes from the local haulers. Todd did a lot of communication with various haulers to determine volumes and hauling routes and where they go. Some of them to our landfill in the Cusp, some to the village of the Cusp at the time, and the vast majority to Otishania.
Further, Director Popoff?
Yeah, so my understanding is work in progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So to Director Lockwood, then for the second time, Director Vandenberg, and I have one more piece to interject. Please go ahead, Director Lockwood.
Thank you. Mine are pretty simple questions. We talked about parks about a year ago, what septage was going to happen with that. What you just said was this was going to be just residential. So we're not talking any porta potties or anything like that going into this system?
Well, I would just say that we have intent, so there's a bit of an elephant in the room with these other wastes which are getting into our systems, and there are no existing services for it. So we have made sure to keep raising this with Preston that, if you guys are monitoring it and then you're starting to reject it, where's it going to go? So I think it is our responsibility to not ignore that fact, right? Because all of a sudden you build something, now you're catching these things, but there's no other service. So, and then the other thing I think is capacity. So porta potties is raw sewage and it's pretty concentrated. And I think on a case-by-case basis, it is dependent on the plant's capacity. So you could, right now we have a very general septage bylaw for what we're allowing into our pits. And that says residential septage, and that's related in a lot of times to our operational certificates for our landfills. It could be different for each facility depending on how big of a population we're serving and what the plant capacity is. So, I wouldn't think it would necessarily be rigid that it only has to be residential, but the chances of them being able to handle like hydrocarbons, like probably not going to be able to handle that. So it's complex, and I think it'll be different for every situation.
Further?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
So is this a level 3 operator? Do we know that, or can it be a level 2 operator?
You mean from the wastewater facility certification?
Yeah.
The certified operator is determined by the permit that the facility has.
Okay,
And as long as the facility is safely able to handle these strength and volumes of the waste, there is no change in the operator certification level other than what's required by the facility anyhow.
okay. And my very last one is, so if we do have a rejected load, because I'm thinking of Salmo, if we do have a rejected load, what that, like you say, it's getting in there right now. What is our responsibility as a regional district with those rejected loads?
You mean if we find contamination overload? There's a very high chance that you find the contamination after unloading. Right? You are not going to the truck and sample from it and wait till the lab result comes back 2 days later. So it's going into the facility, but the strength comes from saying, if we find you with these ineligible materials, we may fine you, and second time we may exclude you from using the facility altogether. So there is a vested business interest for the haulers to work with us in identifying any kind of loads. Sometimes it's even difficult for them to know what they're loading up. But I would anticipate that the haulers will work closely with us and not knowingly haul and transport materials or to risk to the facility or themselves in regards to their license.
Okay, thank you.
And Todd enjoys, he likes to revise the fees and charges bylaw. It's letting you get penalty lines in different situations for every community. That's absolutely his thing. So for the first time, Director McFadden, and maybe myself, and Ben and Bert, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you to the chair. Just listening through some of the conversation, which I had no idea about until this conversation. So thoughts on if we have materials that are being rejected, and I understand why, because we deal with them in City Casper. Most of our problems at our substance treatment plant is because of stuff that shouldn't be going in our septic plant. So I do very intricately understand how complicated these systems are now, more than I ever thought I would in my life. But do we as a regional district have a solution for those rejected materials, and what is that going to be? Because the problem is, if as a regional district, our job sitting on this table is to take care of resource recovery. Like it is this field, and so if we are not providing something, but then I feel like we're not doing our job. Like we need to have an alternative if it's not going there. So and this is, I'm sure, conversations you guys have had before I've been around this table. So I'm wondering about what is our strategy and our plan to deal with those rejected materials, especially if now we're going to be monitoring more, which I agree with. I understand it ruins systems and can't function properly, but what is our solution then to fix that for our residents?
If I may, this is very similar to what we do on the solid waste side. If we, i.e., have an application for a solid disposal and sample it and it comes back exceeding the parameter allowable to go into a municipal facility like we are, that is the problem of the owner of these materials. So they may have to haul it to a special waste facility, Northern Alberta or whatever. For liquid wastes, I don't know what facilities exist. It depends slightly on the type of contamination too. Is it a hydrocarbon issue? Is it heavy metals and? But it becomes the problem of the owner of these materials and the hauler. That is not our responsibility, and it exceeds our capabilities. We won't have a facility to accommodate hazardous waste.
Paula?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Here's my concern. Without a solution, we're going to create more problems. Like if we're now flagging this and we're expecting local contractors who are collecting things and disposing of things, fill in the blank, local businesses that are already stretched and we don't have a solution for them that's regional, I do think we're going to end up creating a bigger problem where they're going to be dumped somewhere we don't want them to be dumped, or placed somewhere they don't want them to be placed. And so I hear what you're saying. It's that it's not technically our responsibility, but it is our responsibility to see the consequences of our decisions. And I think the consequence of some of these decisions is that we can create a problem that then we are trying to deal with. So I just push back a little and say, okay, what are that solution that we're not looking at them having to go to Northern Alberta or fill in the blank, because it may not be a viable solution without creating more problems that then we're having to deal with waste being put at places that we don't want it to be.
Can you go to Todd?
Anyway,
Sure.
I know there's no solution or answer right now. I'm not expecting one.
There is, like I said, we deal with this already on the solid waste side, right? We do screen for that. We have limitations what we can deal with it. And then it goes to special companies dealing with these special contaminants. May it be certain asbestos waste that need to be prepared before it can come to us. May it be an old couple that has an old house with a heating oil tank and contaminated soils in their backyard, right? These are problems on a daily basis where we are not allowed to take these materials to our landfill, and where they need to go to a special service provider at a high cost to deal with that. So we do that already on the solid waste side. I don't see that significantly different on the liquid waste side. So if somebody has sumps that are full of hydrocarbons because they don't have oil separator prior to their sump, then they have to deal with the consequences of that.
And we'll go to Todd. Those consequences may be after the fact and monetary. But that's why I'm half joking when you can write a lot of stuff into a bylaw about maybe in the future, you're going to have every load tested before you're allowed to dump and sit there. Anyway, Todd.
And there's just like an open pondering of things, not a concrete answer, but I think it is a risk, like what you've raised is a conversation to have. Like if we're getting into a future municipal partnership, say with the city of Castlegar, this is something that needs to be discussed and also discussed with the local haulers there, so we get an idea of, you know, how many sumps are you emptying a year, and how many grease traps are, you know, and looking at those types of waste. We do have limited, I think, responsibility on the liquid waste management side of things as a regional district. But where I came from in Victoria, there was a number of private operations that set up shop, GFL, and a number of other ones. And so there's, you know, it's always open for exploration. I mean, for oil water separators, usually it's a small amount of oil and it's mostly water. So can a wastewater treatment plant find a business case for having some sort of a decanting system where they allow it to separate and drain the water and then send a small concentrated waste off at a lower cost? Or storage facility, I don't know. It's a conversation that needs to happen, and there's also a willingness to pay. You know, the cost of having a local solution might even be more expensive than sending it out when you look at such a small amount of businesses for an expensive facility. But I think our due diligence is to make sure that we're not ignoring it and having those conversations. Julie and I have invited the haulers. We're having a meeting with haulers in September. Most of them are not that vocal. Most of them don't return my calls and my emails. But the three that do are very, very vocal. And we're looking forward to having a good conversation, because I know that they've got tons of ideas and very strong opinions about stuff. So that engagement piece is happening and will continue to happen as we start to move into other areas once we're done with Preston.
For now? For the first time? Sure. Oh, okay. Then jump in a little bit with a bit of a question, because all of us with septic tanks might wonder what our responsibilities might be today or in the future. We talked in the past about cost sensitivity. $40 a cubic meter, someone might pump your tank. You get a meter and a half, $60 is what they're going to pay Preston, but they're going to charge you $300 or $400. So we can double or triple the cost of pumping, disposal of this material, offloading it into the Preston system. That's not going to double or triple the cost of service. Could be potential for gouging. Question is, what's on the horizon, or what are you seeing in terms of requirement for people with septic tanks to demonstrate? You know, like with type 2 or type 3 system, you have maintenance requirements. What are we seeing on the horizon? Because if we increase the costs, we may see a reduction in volume. And then, of course, you don't get the same return as you expected, and then you got to increase the cost again. What's on the horizon?
I can't say what's on the horizon, but I have been through this exact scenario in the Capital Regional District where we implemented a mandatory 5-year pump out for type 1 systems. And then for type 2 and 3 systems, we had an annual maintenance. So you had to have a registered on-site wastewater practitioner come to your system, make sure that it was still functioning properly and working as designed. It was in that part of BC, it was an uphill battle to the committee deliberated for 5 years to come up with a 5-year solution. I just said that out loud. Some people thought it should be 7 years. Some people thought it should be 3. There's no one size fits all. And I think that's what they would believe. For most people, this would be good enough. But in this region, I would see that be a very difficult undertaking. We'd have lots and lots of resistance that don't tell me how often I need to pump up my septic system. So I can't speak to what the political appetite would be and what it would be, but there is an existing model out there in the Capital Regional District, and I think others have adopted it. So got lots of resources if we did want to pursue that path.
Thanks, because we just can't subsidize through taxation, because in the town of Creston, be paying whatever their share is, 26, 27%.
Actually, we can, but.
Well, we can't, we don't want to without a transfer agreement.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think like with any program that you implement, your initial step is the educational component. We just talked to you a day or two ago about participating in distributing the information about Septic Awareness Week. We're going to put that on our website and maybe in other form as well. Distribute that information so that people realize how important it is actually to regularly service your system. So I see that being one part, but you mentioned taxation is a potential other avenue if we want to pursue what we have in the Western Subregion already, is have an actual septic service. In that case, we could have for example, just throwing that out as an idea, could have a parcel tax that carries part of the cost. It would then reduce the actual cost of servicing your septic service, and the ones that don't service their septic system participate to a certain degree in the overall cost of having that service available. So there's models out there, but I think that's way down the road until we try to solve these solutions. But initially, I think creating the awareness that everybody in the rural area, or pretty well everybody in the rural area, has a tank down there, and it is there for a reason, and it only works to do certain things and consider certain things. So I think that's probably the first step in our efforts.
Thank you. Chair Watson, I crossed your name off, but it's back on. For the first time, and then back to Director Vandenberg, and I think by then we'll have had a pretty good overview. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mostly just wanted to I was going to respond to what Director McFadden had raised, and then essentially there's two things I wanted to mention. One is there are so many areas where doing the wrong thing we can be looked to managing, like illegal waste is one that we've talked about for years, and it's a tricky one because yes, we have a lot of FSRs, they're really accessible. Currently in the East Kootenays, they don't even have tipping fees, so it's not staff have looked into it. So if we don't have high fees, does that discourage illegal dumping, or does that mean taxation is just really high? So there's all these kind of complex complements to it. The fact that we get materials that are toxic and not manageable, I would not want to encourage, let's figure out a way to deal with them so that they don't go to the right place. I would rather get the education out and say, don't do that. That's not how you do it. So that we can stop the practice instead of publicly funding poor practices. So it's a loose, that's kind of my loose approach to it. But with that, what I wanted to raise is some of the things I've noticed in our more remote rec sites, which I don't think they actually pump. But I do know the amount of public dumping of things like diapers and garbage is horrendous, to the point where they have to shut them down and start new ones. So there's this kind of public complacency. I want to say it's lack of education. I hope it's just lack of education, although common sense should come in there somewhere. Where we need to really be a society that says, don't do stuff that's ridiculous. There's a reason why it's not accepted.
And so I really like the education component. And what I wanted to suggest is that when we do that, even though the remote rec sites generally remain in the ground, we should encourage education up there as well, because it's actually the park supervisors who are having to go around being like, hey, please don't do that. So it's unfortunately a really bad society, like a cultural thing that we need to do our best to educate around, but I do not want to publicly fund bad behavior.
Caroline Beach, they just moved the pit toilet 10 feet every year. Go down and see where they were for the last 2 decades. Director Vandenberg, you have a few thoughts to wrap up maybe. Oh, sorry, if I might, Director Main for the first time, sorry, I didn't see her.
Okay, and this is a comment. In discussions at FCM, I've raised this a number of times and it has gone nowhere, that there are federal grants available for wastewater treatment infrastructure, given certain conditions, and septic systems are not considered to be wastewater treatment plants. And so there's a built-in inequity between, against rural areas and small towns that are reliant on septic systems versus larger towns and municipalities that have water and wastewater treatment plants. And so listening to this discussion, given the opportunity, I will raise it again at, with other orders of government. Thank you.
Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I really love hearing the educational piece, the septic awareness, linking operation and maintenance manuals that go with that. That is part of the process. Todd, your comment on Holler Conversation, they do have a lot of information and a lot of possible solution to it. So I just want to wrap this up in my mind so we're talking about $1.3 million investment in the capital. Supposed to last 20 years. That's the hope. So that capital investment is $65,000 per year. During that time, we're looking at a flow rate of about 300 cubic meters, 300 tons of product per year. The math works out to $216 per cubic meter. We're not charging $216 for the haulers to be able to dump their waste in there. It's like 60, 70, 80. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I'm going to what your options are. You talk about, you got 4 boroughs and let's redo this. The first one's redo this. Going to Director Main's comments, this is an infrastructure thing. We really need to be looking at getting infrastructure dollars from the government to help us with this construction, because $216 per meter is what it's going to cost. Our taxpayers can't afford that, even if it's being offset by $70 or $80. We need some outside money into this infrastructure project. And so that's the suggestion that I'm trying to put forward at this. If you do the math, we're not going to be able to afford this. Our taxpayers will not be able to afford this. We have to look at another way of bringing in infrastructure money to help us with this project. Just wanted to suggest that.
Through the chair, Amy, I don't know if you know the numbers of the top of the head, or you thought in there, but I thought we did the math and ended up somewhere in the $110 range per cubic meter, all in cost.
Based on A&E. That's where I just did.
So we won't solve this here.
I'll check into that.
All the volumes and numbers, because Associated Engineering made some broad assumptions in terms of volumes and stuff, which will be tightened up without a doubt. And likely will be the 100.
Yeah, through the chair, the detailed design is underway right now. So there'll be some new numbers from a updated set of information. We did have about 115 or 20-ish from the Growing Communities Fund that is funding this detailed design portion for this year. And we will certainly look into grant opportunities. There just hasn't been one that fits this currently. The town of Creston has let us know they're in the process of this project is coinciding with other plant upgrades, and they want this all to coincide and move forward. And they have indicated if we don't do it now, they might not want to partner with us in the future. So we are in a bit of a timeline with this that we're not driving.
But very good point. This is highly cost sensitive, short of having, trying to enforce some kind of required pump every 5 years. So lots of information there. We'll see what happens. If we go to item 4, extended producer responsibility program concerns. Amy, this may be your last letter to Mr. George Hammond because he's not running or something like that. You can give us your overview, please.
Can I start with mentioning something on this? So we were directed to draft this letter. There was as well, and unfortunately I don't think Director Davidoff is here, but I believe we had as well direction to staff to send an invoice for past recycling costs. I just wanted to mention before we discuss the letter that I have instructed my staff at this first version not to include the invoicing portion in this letter for the reason that I think we neither have a legal basis for invoicing nor from a finance perspective of issue an invoice a basis to do that the auditors would accept. So please keep that in mind. I'm happy to revise this letter again to include the invoicing if that's the direction the directors want to go, but I just wanted to, if you wonder why that element isn't there, that was my instruction to our staff.
I'm not certain that we actually supported the invoicing at this time. And Amy, you do.
Through the chair, there is a resolution 187/24 that the RDCK submit an accounting of the amount recommended by staff to the province of BC, Recycle BC, and any other appropriate entities to recoup the annual costs paid by RDC taxpayers for the recycling costs beyond RBC program incentives that should be fully funded. And further, that the invoice be included in upcoming board communications with the province to address EPR concerns and sent to the Minister of Finance and any other entities listed in invoice along with supporting statement prepared by staff.
So you have provided a summary amount of the accounting. We're now pushing a defensible $1 million, and you stop there as your message to me.
Without making express mentioning of an invoice that we attach to this letter.
Okay, Watson Page.
And Weatherhead.
Okay, thank you. And we haven't had an introduction to this, but
I just procedurally wanted to know, we'll need a motion. There is no motion on the agenda, but we will need a motion because this is a different letter than the ICI one that I signed last month, which thank you, Amy, via email. Let me know this was different. So when we get to it, we'll need a motion.
okay, and Directors Page and Weatherhead, can we wait and have the close notes and then we'll go back to this?
Yes, so,
Go ahead, please.
and what I would like to start off with is Head Director Watson, you were not the only one that asked that question, both Stuart and Newly did as well. So I want to give a little bit of clarity. So, and I understand there's a lot of acronyms that are sounding very similar. So, this letter is for the province and it's in regard to the recycling regulation, which directs extended producer responsibility programs. So, we had a letter last month and that was also for the province, but it was specifically for a response to their discussion paper on ICI recycling. So that's a separate entity. It is mentioned in here again. It's part of what we'd like to see as an EPR program. So that's why it's in this letter again. This is not a letter to Recycle BC. This is a letter to the province to talk about EPR programs in general. And so we'll try and be a little bit more really clear. When we brought, for example, earlier this year, we brought the Recycling Council of BC report, and there was a lot of talk about Recycle BC, and that is not them either. So I apologize that this is kind of compounds when we're talking about all these different acronyms and programs and things, and trying to provide as much clarity as we can. So if I can borrow my...
Yeah, you need that. Just read it again.
So I just wanted to start off with some clarity of the parties and then history. So in February, I originally brought this to joint and it was just a verbal report and it was titled Program Concerns. And we were talking about all the things that are in this letter. And then the discussion kind of went through a few point of orders and discussions. And then we ended up canceling the March joint meeting. So it was discussed at board, and that's where that resolution came out that I just discussed. So it's taken us, we've had a very busy year, and very busy still with EOC and various things. So this is the letter as the outcome of that resolution. But as Julie mentioned, we don't feel it's appropriate to send an invoice with this. The RBC is part of this letter, and they're not in contravention of the statement of work and the master services agreement that we have signed. So what we are rolling is a program based on our design elected by this committee, and that's where that cost comes from. And Recycle BC, I'm part of the working group that's going on right now. They're in the process of updating their statement of works, and they're in the process of updating their incentives, and that's going to come out in September. Don't know if you'll see it in September, because by the time it comes out, it'll probably be an October thing. And then we'll have new agreements in January. So they acknowledge in this working group that their incentives are not high enough. And they've done a survey, and the preliminary data on that shows a wide range of what it's costing municipalities and collectors and local governments to roll these programs out. And we'll see where they land with that. So it is underway, and a lot of these things are underway. The point of the letter is to identify, this is like the second or third letter we've talked to them about ongoing issues on how we're not well served by EPR programs this is not just RDTK alone. This is at the waste groups that we're a part of. Rural and remote communities have this issue across the province, and a lot of it is because their program reports and various things are BC wide, so they can get really great success in the lower mainland and the island and high population areas in the Okanagan, and the rest of us are sitting here going like, what the heck? And there's, we constantly have people that offer to operate collection facilities outside of us, and these are tires and oil and various businesses. And they're just doing this as a side part of their business, and they constantly are in and out of accepting these materials because of low service or not getting enough incentive. And so the intention, like I don't want to go through every detail in the letter, we can do a little bit of a recap, but the intention of this is just to yet again to point out that the EPR programs are not meeting their prerogatives in our area, and we really want them to change that. Like, I don't know how long we can go on saying, hey, what about us? So this letter points out that, we have poor service levels, we have high cost, and there's a number of programs that aren't specific to our district, but there's a number of programs in their new 5-year action plan that are really slow to roll out, and we want them. So that's not specific to rural, remote, or RDCK, but so the first part here in the letter is highlighting that RBC, the cost for our district to operate our RBC program is essentially not far off $1 million beyond what when you take off ICI, because that's not part of their program, and you take off certain incentives, it's still costing about $1 million. We have to be careful because the RBC especially will argue that satellites are not part of their program, and that's something we elect to do. So we tried to point out in the letter what that amount is, and it's not significant. Like, it's in that $1 million, I think it was a couple $100,000, and we took mostly just the hauling contract from that, because we feel if that material was at a regular core depot, that depot would be bigger, it would require more snow removal, it would require more staff, it would, and so we really tried to highlight this is the separate hauling contracts. There are a couple other things like rent and staffing that they could argue are ours, but we can argue those would be added to the core depots. And so we're trying to be pretty clear about what we're arguing here, because I think when I sent something similar to Recycle BC around February, and their first question was, how much of that is ICI and how much of that is satellite? So we're trying to be careful to be really specific. So, but we also feel like those satellite depots are important for the level of service we want for our residents, and to keep that material diverted to the landfill. So I think it's important to add it into the discussion, but make sure it's highlighted. So the other item in here is Recycle BC. All EPR programs have a program plan, and every 5 years they have to redo it. So Recycle BC's program, I think, is from 22. I wish Connie was here for this. Somebody's fact checking. Their program has been in draft with the province for some time. And they haven't accepted it yet. They gave them comments and it's under second revision. And one of those items in the program plan was changing their program criteria, the community eligibility criteria. And Travis did an assessment and it looks like we would lose up to 5 of our principal core depots. So those would move into our satellite depots and that would obviously increase our costs even further. The province hasn't accepted that yet, so this is just an opportunity to point out, please don't accept that, or if it is, it's, should only be eligible for, like, we should be grandfathered in so that we don't lose that status for current depots. And then, so then basically to summarize our RBC item, it's just pointing out that, we don't feel like it's meeting all of our needs and that it's not fair that they're gauging the success of the program by what's happening province-wide. It should be more equitable across the province. ICI, they're looking at ICI. That's what that letter was from last year. We're just trying to point out again, like, please expedite this. We need to get ICI programs in place and not have us have to manage a totally separate program.
Last month.
Yes, that was last month's letter.
Last year.
Household hazardous waste, we just want to point out how much money we're spending on supporting the Leafs and supporting these events and monitor it. Household hazardous waste is one of the items in this 5-year plan. And again, it's something that's being kind of slow to roll out. So a lot of these things that we're paying entirely to support through these household hazardous waste events should be part of an EPR program. So we want them to get that going. And then the other point of that is the oil and antifreeze and other things. Like those are collection locations that we only have 2 right now for oil in the RDCK. And these are ones where they keep dropping off because the service providers are not, so they need to have the EPR programs monitor their contractors and be more engaged and make sure that they're servicing their collectors. And then the final point on here was the new EPR programs. And really there's a number of items that we pay, the propane tanks and mattresses and that kind of thing. And they cost us a lot to manage. And so these are things we really want them to get going. We now understand that they're going to wait till after the election and hopefully it's not something that gets lost. So just really wanted to push forward, like these are high costs for us and we feel they're essential as an EPR program. So we try to point out things from our waste composition study, what the issues are, what we would like to see as actions, and from staff, I think this message is better than sending an invoice for $1 million. I mean, we are very happy to revise the letter with your comments. We do have a draft recommendation to issue it as is, and if you guys want to add some comments, we can go ahead and make those and the chair can approve it, or we can take your comments and revise it and bring it back in September. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. So I think you hit the high points and the low points, which is perfect. Before going to a bit of a speaker's list, if it's a letter to Minister George Heyman, should be a letter from our board chairs. And we have been invited directly by ADM. I keep forgetting her name. I don't know why it wants to come to my mind. I didn't come up with it, Keith, like I said I would have earlier today. We've been invited to send the cost information in detail. So that certainly would make sense as a separate staff-to-staff letter. We've sat in the room and she said, yeah, I want to know that. I want to see those numbers. Did you see them last year? Mike Morrison was there. You would have the notes. You weren't able or able to be in that meeting, but Mike sat, Stuart with that, and they want those numbers. Short of being maybe an invoice format, but absolutely, that invitation's open.
Can you pop up to your speakers?
Okay, thank you. So I have, and just to make sure people haven't had a second thought, I have Watson Page, Weatherhead, Vandenberg, Popoff, Schmid. So please go ahead, Chair.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to note was the letter's fantastic. I don't see any needs for change. I really appreciate, yes, we've written lots of letters, but we've also had over a decade of conversations. Every UBCM, we have a standard meeting with Ministry of Environment to talk about all of the ICI, the EPR, overall recycling. It's a constant conversation. The good news is that we've developed really good relationships with staff So even when the minister changes, they still know who we are when we walk in. So with that, I believe we actually do have a meeting. I'm not sure if it's been confirmed yet, but again, we have a board supported meeting requested at UBCM, that the executive and joint resource, chairs generally join. My main note was that I would like to have copies of all the letters we've sent over the years to come with us, and that we'll present that to them as, here's a collection of every piece of material our board has sent you with background. So Julie, I know it's a bit of a research project because it's been a decade, but I think it'll help if we have a stack of like, here's all the absolute facts we've sent you over the past decade. So I would like that to be included, that we bring to them. It's not a part of our briefing notes. Those have already been submitted, but we physically hand it to them.
Yes, that's what I wondered. In briefing notes, if we should, I'd probably be able to find the previous briefing notes easily. We could have the letters plus the briefing notes as a separate little backup.
Yes, actually, we could, sorry, supplemental to that is we can also include the briefing notes, which are, you know, a very short version of our letters.
Okay. Sponsor, I guess, just for dig it out.
Yeah, we'll have to dig that out. Will take a while. As you know, we were 4 weeks now very decimated in the research recovery department. So just slowly coming back from EOC and other leaves that we had, and other vacation periods. So we'll have a little bit of a backlog with some stuff. We have some focus on the costing study, for example, as one of the essential pieces that we need to bring forward. But we will try to gather this. Just can't make any promises in regards to an exact timeline.
I might have some specific files I've saved and
Just
other
like
waste chairs might have.
you know, speaking with Christine or Angela, they generally have to track those things. So they might have a quicker way to access what we've sent. Yeah, thank you.
Director Page.
Okay, I've got a few options thrown on the table. With the statements of work and the master agreements to the chair and staff, as they look at renewing these, are we going to have an opportunity to potentially refuse to re-enter into these agreements? And how are we going to be able to negotiate with Recycle BC down the road?
So through the chair, I have the black line versions. There's not a ton of changes.
Yeah.
I only actually think we're looking at changing the master services agreement at all. And those are consistent across the province, basically.
They might be consistent, but I guess I'm suggesting they may not have to.
We will have the opportunity to negotiate. Like I said, I'll be bringing them in September if we get it soon enough, or October, and with the intention of the protocol of the contracts expire at the end of the year. So January 1st, we'll need a new one. So we've got a few months to get some negotiations, things that I think we would have the ability to negotiate would be whether we can include ICI or not. Because that's in this, they said when we joined, they could do that originally, include ICI. And then near the 11th hour, they said the markets have tanked. We don't want to manage any more materials. Sorry, you can't have ICI in your stuff at all.
And that's probably the important piece. As you know, regional district forever fought back, not participating in this program when it was originally rolled out. And in the end, it was a take it or leave it. This is our statement. It works. And we take this out. If you don't like it, then don't join. It's just cheaper for us. That was the attitude that we had whenever we, in various negotiations, tried to achieve anything with RBC. And I think the real way of changing anything has to come through force from MOE onto the acceptance of a plan or tightening up of the plans that they bring forward on a 5-year basis. We have simply, we are too small. If we would be, Vancouver is a different negotiation position, but we are really just, the little thing that is at the end that So I can't say that because our contracts say I can say
Yeah,
that.
we will not talk about the contract or criticize the service provider according to our contract. But we should,
Chair, the way that they do that is this is a province-wide program, so they are trying to be consistent on how they apply it across the province. So one thing we could also would have specific to us is the number of core depots we're allowed. So there are some parameters that we can negotiate, but otherwise they have one statement of work for the province. They're going to get one set of incentives. They have a cost per ton for any material or any household number of households if you're a curbside. That's all standardized across the province. So there's some components limited that we'll be able to negotiate, and the rest of it is going to be a take it or leave it. We went out to market before we signed with Recycle BC. And because of the way the recycling market's changed, it would have cost us well more than this $1 million to have the same level of system. And we wouldn't have all the protections in place of knowing that the recycling is going somewhere, it's getting recycled, it's being managed properly. And so this, we could go out to market again. I don't know if it's changed since then. By the way that the cardboard separate our ICI stuff is not changed significantly. I don't know that we're going to see that, and I would expect that we would probably see a reduction in the materials we could recycle because a lot of the private outfits are not recycling the foams and the soft plastics.
Okay, so that would have been essentially my supplemental is we would still be required to go out and find a contractor should we draw a hard line in the sand and not go ahead with RBC.
we must manage.
Yes,
We still must manage on the other end of it.
through the chair, we could go to mark this a private entity
Sure.
and
Okay,
try
I
to
got that.
make it recycled elsewhere.
And so I support us the letter and to have the statement of work expanded to properly capture rural and urban needs. I think that's good work, and I just would suggest we also maybe slow walk an agreement in and see what pressure we can apply on the other side. I do have I got clarity from staff, so unless there's much.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I mean, clearly a big portion of our cost is the staffing of these sites.
Yeah.
And staffing these sites in order to have materials that actually have a chance to be recycled and not go into a large degree, as it was in the late stages of our previous program, into disposal or incineration. Is a big portion, and that will, in any EPR program, I think we will not stand a chance to ever recover that. At best, we get a higher return on the materials that we are collecting, and get concessions in regards to the number of depots that they support. But we should not have any illusions that the $1 million is going entirely away ever. A portion of that, a large portion of that, will always stick with us if we intend to recycle in the current market situation. The only time it worked before differently was by shipping it in large quantities to Asian markets where they were, who knows what, done with. And as soon as these Asian markets disappeared, and we did a North America and local addressing and recycling all of these materials, there's no way around that cost.
Okay, then, thank you.
Oh,
Can I add a second question?
quickly and then, okay, then I have 4 more speakers who might end up standing up after we decide what to do the letter. Go ahead.
Sure. On the question of local businesses, sellers of product pulling out, the licensing powers of municipalities allow for the implementation of requirements connected with obtaining business licensing. Have we ever explored and solicited municipalities in specifically around various streams to implement requirements of business licenses, say of a large box store retailer selling antifreeze and oil, that the business license is actually a requirement that you receive the other end of those product uses?
We can't issue or enforce business requirements. Yeah. We don't have that power in rural areas.
But I'm suggesting we get some clarity around what those requirements would be, where we're getting the biggest hit and the lowest service, where we're seeing the biggest gaps, and going to the cities and asking specifically, can you make these requirements in your business licenses for these producers where this waste is coming from?
But presumably this would be municipal business residents. Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the impact over here,
Yeah.
but we need the action to happen in here, in the center.
Right. Beyond today's conversation, I think it's-
I just want to add one thing to that, and that's an important consideration. So for us, we are just at the step of getting the larger ICI customers in regards to organics on board. And with limited success, and I think the next step is to have that clear discussion about saying, if you don't work with us voluntarily, we need to consider other steps.
Yeah.
So this is an important aspect of that, and I think that is something we need to consider down the road. But as I said earlier, initially we look for volunteerism, education, and things like that to get them on board. But that could be a potential next step.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And just to note, I don't know, I was trying to pull up on my email some background information, and it's frozen, so I don't know if anyone else's email's locked up. So we will go to Weatherhead, Vandenberg, Pop Stream. Director Weatherhead, please go ahead.
I thank you through the chair. First of all, I thought this was an excellent letter, Manager Wilson. I feel that Chair Watson actually answered my questions around Minister Heyman and what would happen in succession if in 35 days or whatever we have left. And so, but something that Manager Wilson spoke to had me thinking too about the cost, and maybe this isn't the time to ask, but will the Nakusp depot it's no longer going to be considered a core depot? So now does that recycling, that extra cost that we have to pay for our transfer stations now going to be applying? We're going to lose a core depot. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through the chair, I don't know that Nakusp was, Edgewood was on that list. Then it would just become a decision to keep that depot and convert it to a satellite. And then, so we would have to get a contract to haul that satellite, material from that satellite to the nearest core.
So thank you. May I supplemental
Yes,
that?
go ahead, please.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
With then would that mean then that the Nakusp depot would lose its ability to recycle, what was it, plastic bags, styrofoam, glass? Were those the things that that we would no longer have at that depot?
Through the chair, Nakusp actually wouldn't be at risk with this eligibility criteria.
Okay.
So
great.
But the five that I did list in there, Belford, Crescent Valley, Crawford Bay, Slocan, and Edgewood, which currently would accept all the materials, that was our business decision to only offer fiber containers and glass at the satellite depots because of the additional hauling and infrastructure required for that. Mm-hmm. So that would be a business decision to decide if we would continue to support those other materials there.
All right, thank you. We have some prolific recyclers out Edgewood Way, so
yeah. So through the chair's follow-up, the core depots have to collect all of those materials. The satellite depots, we can choose what we want.
And with the transfer station or Nakusp being turned into a transfer station, does it change the status of the recycling?
No.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Yes, in support of the letter, we might as well add it to the stack. I'm not sure how many more years. It's all about timing. It's all about timing. Get that letter in front of them at the right time. My question is around, as far as the incentives for recycling and diversion with core and eco depots, is it the same incentive regardless if you're a private sector or a municipality? It doesn't change that way?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Okay. Director Popov, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. When I look at that letter, I think it's well composed. It identifies how much we subsidize. And I believe it's far more effective than sending an invoice, which we know the provincial government will never pay anyways. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Schmink.
I'll pass, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any others. Oh, Cunningham, Director Cunningham, go ahead.
Slightly off topic, but
Please no.
as you know, we were heading into a provincial election, and I was looking at all the parties, and very carefully and looking at the. Do you feel that? Well, personally, I feel that we might be afraid that some of the money that is being given to us to do these things, maybe cut back if we have to change in provincial government. Have we given any thought to that, or?
I think being in a public committee meeting, we don't comment or speculate on the outcome of a provincial election. We just,
however, it is always wise to make sure that you've investigated and make sure that we're on the right side.
I think staff are prepared to work with whatever we are given to work with. So that's
Afraid of that.
Just one brief note, did get a notification from Director Hannigan about the shutdown of the Castlegar facility and what options for used oil there is and similar materials. I have to admit I lost a little bit patience with this program after 15 years of advocating for a proper program and sent a somewhat nasty letter to Interchange and so yeah.
No, that's good. I think we have to get back to the letter and a recommendation. Chair Watson, you want to read your recommendation? I think Nancy has it.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
That the board send the letter as drafted to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy regarding the extended producer responsibility programs in the RDCK.
And thank you. And that would be from board chair because it's going to the minister.
Yeah, I believe, let's just double check the wording on that.
Does that work? Or?
Yes, yeah.
Not to discredit your hard work and
No, actually, through the chair, the reason why I didn't put your name on it, because I think last time I did, it was a draft, and there was some comment on how we shouldn't make it look like it was a letter that was ready to go. So it says draft, and there's no one's name on it at the moment.
The motion does state the board. I'll just note that Amy and I having the same initials, I also didn't know who she was representing.
That was the thing from AW. Okay, so moved and seconded. I understand we're going to see tomorrow further discussion on the recommendation. Seeing none, all in favor? That's scary. What do we got? 227. We have a couple items. We can stand up and stretch till 2:35. Can we try in 7-8 minutes? 2:35, we'll come back. Yeah.
How are you?
I think that doesn't stop me worried about budget. $5 for that. Something but I think you already covered it. We can subsidize. They have to put it together or.
What we can do
We'll make it.
We got operating and
Do the same. All of our answers.
at some point. I'm talking forward. About putting it solved.
starting
Hey, the board, you're on open mic. You might want to mute it.
That's what I'm
So, okay, we are a minute longer than we thought we'd be. Just a bit of a break there, so we are call the meeting back to order.
Yeah.
Nope. We're at item 5. Roman Narrows. Oh, sorry, no. Roman Narrows Transfer Station Expansion Contract Award.
Chair?
Oh, so do we need to? Yes.
I wonder, just as a supplemental to the last item about the letter, but I didn't want to confuse matters while we had a motion and what have you. I thought Uli could just share a little bit about what challenges being faced at the Nelson Recycling Depot and how we rely on it and it's us doing it without the government, but might be just another piece of how complicated.
With your permission, briefly?
Yep, go ahead. 2 minutes.
Thanks, Chair.
2 minutes, yes. Now, the recycling depot, you would have seen repeated closed days
Just
with closed.
clarify, it's the Nelson Leaves Depot, not the recycling depot. You're talking about the Leaves Depot, right?
Nelson Leaves Recycling Depot.
Okay, just when you say Nelson Recycling.
No, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I thought that's how it leaves. I'm sorry.
Just clarify.
Nelson Leaves Recycling Depot saw repeated closure days. We have reached out to them. They have significant staffing struggles that they go through. Where I would say probably half of the staff was not available for various reasons, without going into too much details. Just that you're aware of that. We try to disseminate some of that information on our website, because it did likely extend for periods where people, myself included, a couple times went there and was closed at that time. So just that awareness that they are struggling with that and how difficult it is for a relatively small entity to provide these services reliably ongoingly, and that is something that we need to consider when we look for solutions, and how difficult it is ultimately to provide an ongoing day-to-day service as broad as they do, and at a cost level to us as they do, that is relatively inexpensive. So just as an awareness piece, as we look for expanding that model out, just that it's not without struggles for the ones that we currently have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, thanks. So, back to item 5 on the agenda, Roman Narrows Transfer Station Expansion Contract Award. We have 2 recommendations to the board, one on rescinding and one on a new motion. Amy, this is yours to give the overview.
Yeah, thank you. So back in June, we had a board resolution to award the Roman Narrows expansion to Ward Engineering. We had 4 bids submitted, and Ward was the highest evaluated proposal. After we were negotiating, Ward was unable to meet our contract requirements, specifically insurance, for the level we required for this work. And so, to be fair with the other bidders, we went back out to them, and our second preferred opponent was audited. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And they have confirmed that they are able to meet our requirements. They actually were the lowest bid. And the second highest evaluated bid. So we are happy to move forward with them and get this project started. So basically what we're looking for is a rescinding of the resolution to award to the project to Ward Engineering, and a new one to award it to
Okay, thank you. And then, so I guess there's 2 recommendations. Being in committee, we could move them as a block, or I think the individual we rescind before we move to the second one. And is Janine also online to answer questions? Or I guess first questions from the committee?
Recommendation.
You move both recommendations as a block. Do we have a second for that? Discussion on the recommendations.
Just a quick process thing for Nancy, that where it says and further the second time, you can remove that. after be rescinded, if you're an east spread, that and further needs to be removed. Oh, it's just that it says that the board approved.
Oh, so
That's to be motion.
Okay.
Oh, these, yeah,
Two separate
these
motions.
will become two separate tomorrow, two separate motions.
Yeah,
So-
for the copy paper thing, sorry.
That's,
No, state this and further comes. Be rescinded as one motion, and get it out there. And then the next one that the board approved is a new motion. And just to confuse you, we're moving them up block. So in the minutes.
Yeah, I see that now, that makes it two.
There you go. So yeah, do. Just doesn't block for the two different motions.
okay, so two recommendations go to board tomorrow, currently a block. Discussion, questions on those recommendations? See anybody, nobody in the chat?
Nope.
No, not since, Dr. Popoff's. Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor of these recommendations? They're carried, both go to board tomorrow, to be read separately. Okay, so we go to the late item or additional item 6, which is the ICI recycling. This is you as well, Amy, I guess? Please go ahead.
So again, we have been in negotiations with Waste Management on our ICI recycling collection contract. They, in review of the terms and conditions in the draft contract, included an RFP, which was a non-binding procurement. They have proposed some new, there was a number of items in there that we negotiated, and Mike and Ray here were heavily involved in that. The one item we got stuck on was indemnity, and so they proposed a mutual indemnity clause. So our current contract does not indemnify the contractor at all. So the indemnity is so that we are indemnified from something caused by the other party, essentially. So not from our own actions, but from something that the other party has done. We negotiated this a few times back and forth. I believe Director Watson might put the indemnity
So
clause.
just gonna ask, we put it in the chat or you got it ready to?
Oh, the motion, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
I was
so
gonna
that
do
we
that.
modify the indemnity clause.
And we
in
do,
chat.
so our options here are to accept Waste Management's indemnity, revised with indemnity, mutual indemnity. Or the other option is to move on, let's say no, and move on to GFL, which was our second bidder. The second GFL's price was double. So there, this is somewhat of a business decision. And the other thing to point out here is the contract was supposed to start September 1st. Even with the Waste Management start, it's expected that there may be a couple of weeks where we might not have any recycling or ICI. We did ask GFL to extend, and they had already repurposed their bins. So they were not willing to extend it for just a month or two because they would have to get new bins to fill in that gap. If we were to go to a contract with them, they would just get new bins for that other contract. So they said that they would go into the 2-year, or they would even go into just a 1-year contract at the prices that they gave us. And if that was the case, we won't have any interruptions in service. We've looked at the budgets. I think we would be okay in 24, but we would likely need a change in our budgets for 25 to accommodate GFL because it is quite a bit higher. Mike is on the line if we have any questions about or concerns about the indemnity clause. I don't know if we want to jump in now, Mike, or just add the conversation if there's questions from us.
Through the chair, only if there's questions.
Maybe I'll point out a little bit, not everybody's has chat or is online. So I'm going to read the little bit that's recommended, and then there's more behind that to make more sense. But proposed motion is that the board approve the indemnification provisions included within agreement number 23-2023 ENV, provision of collection, transportation, and marketing of ICI old corrugated cardboard to the effect of indemnifying Waste Management of Canada against losses that may result from the actions of the RDCK. So you don't have to move that immediately. That's the motion. Realize Waste Management can be picking up ICI from hospitals or high risk manufacturing sites. Could be nuclear waste, could be biomedical waste, could be anything. We're picking up old cardboard. So I think that's the premise here. They just don't want to be responsible for everything that may end up in that bin, which is intended for old cardboard. And we would accept if something that was truly hazardous drops in that bin. That's on us, not on them. That makes sense? So, Mike, I guess the only question to you then would be, do you see any risk based on what we're asking them to do? A close look at this?
Through the chair, I mean, there's always some risk, but I feel like we negotiated the most limited indemnity that Waste Management would accept here. There was stronger wording around the excluded materials, which is probably the riskier part of it, but that was removed and modified for the final version. And this indemnification, mutual indemnification, we're really only indemnifying them against, losses that they would suffer as a result of our actions, so negligence and the like on our part, which it does provide, a fairly limited range of scenarios in which we would be held responsible for. And I'll just note also that the indemnification language, the mutual indemnification language that we landed on here is very similar to the mutual indemnification language that the RDCK uses with member municipalities on service agreements. I'll leave it at that.
So we'll go to Manager Wilson, read the excluded materials, and then to the speakers list.
Yeah, and then one thing I was going to add was the Waste Management has stated to us, we haven't been able to fact check this yet, but they have the same indemnity language with a number of other local government contracts, including our EK, City of Sparwood, City of Castlegar, City of Abbotsford, City of Vancouver. So it's their common language, I guess, in their contracts. Do you want me to read the excluded materials definition?
It's sure, I mean, keywords: radioactive, volatile, corrosive, flammable, explosive, biomedical, infectious, biohazard. We're not hauling that stuff. So maybe if anybody wants the full list, say so. So questions for staff, or if you want to move that recommendation, Chair Watson, start your hand.
I'll ask a question, then I'll move the motion. Just to clarify that the only incentive with GFL would be we wouldn't require this, but the cost of the contract would be double. Am I correct? Okay, then I'll move this motion.
Okay, and so do people want me to read again if you're not on chat? The motion is the board approve the indemnification provisions included within agreement, etc. for ICI old corrugated cardboard to the effect of indemnifying Waste Management of Canada against losses that may result from the actions of the RDCK.
To add to your comment.
Well, I'm sorry, moved, seconded? Thank you, Dr. McFadden. So discussion.
Sorry about that. Just the only comment is that we might lose ICI services for 2 weeks or thereabout, going with the recommended option.
Discussion, go ahead, Director Locke.
With saying that we may lose it, I'm going to use Tamil as an example. When we just put mixed waste, there's so many times that people bring their cardboard and the mixed waste is full. The paper, all that is full, that they put it in the ICI bin. And I'm like, no, that's not ICI. And they're like, it's already in.
It's the ICI bin we won't have. So they'd have to put it into the residential stream, you're saying?
So we're gonna have, what's gonna happen is we're not gonna have a bin there. It's gonna be over full all the time because ours gets full so fast. staff phones and says, yeah, we need this, and ICI just keeps, because it's just all the cardboard, but that's what people put in.
Residential into the ICI. Yeah, it's not good, but, it might be in this case the other way around, but, which we don't have a problem. If it is material that's residential alike, it is quite okay to go into the residential bins.
Classic thing, the grocery store asks you to take your groceries home in the packing box that they received from the supplier. It's now residential. Hard to distinguish. Further discussion? Not, oh, so go ahead.
We have an excess amount that's really good in gardening and composting if you take the plastic off. I use it all the time. I collect it and I make these garden beds. But I have a very small property, so.
I don't think City of Castlegar would agree with that.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the recommendation, that's carried, goes to board tomorrow. We will then go to what's now item 7, public time at 2:52 p.m. And I'm going to be cautious here again. Apparently this morning I tried to ask carefully and quietly, see if anybody was online, public, that wanted to ask a question. I still got an email later saying somebody missed the opportunity. So if there's anybody, member of the public, there's nobody in this room, if you want to unmute and ask a question of this committee, please do so now. We could have that, we could be playing that. So just again, in case anybody's taken a minute to unmute, I see there's a few public online observers, there's a few others, I guess. Any questions of this committee at this time? So hearing none, at 2:53, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody. Maybe we didn't need for this. We need to